Hi folks, welcome to this video on types of strength training, one of four to do with strength training. What we're going to look at is, the methods that we can go about improving strength. So obviously that does link to the types of strength because there are different types of strength, therefore different types of strength training. But what we're going to see is in all these different types of strength training, several common factors. Whenever we are trying to improve strength, we're always about, using some form of resistance. That can be free weights, so dumbbells, kettlebells, bars with the weights attached, or fixed weights. They're the machines that you find at gyms where, you move a key down the stack of weights and then you lift the weight according to how the machine works. But we can have bungee cords, we can have pulleys, you can even use your own body weight. Chin-ups and dips will help you develop various types of strength. Also, repetitions, i.e. the number of times you lift it. So you're going to do 10 lifts or 10 reps, 12 lifts or 12 reps. But obviously, you're going to repeat that 10 or 12 so many times, and we call that sets. So you might end up doing, let's just get a pen in there, something like 3 times 10 reps. And the 3 refers to the sets. Okay, you're doing 3 sets of 10 reps. But also what we've got in there is a work to rest ratio or work to relief ratio, i.e. how long should you be recovering in between each set. So we're going to mention all these, but if anything comes up on strength training, how do you organise a strength training program? Make sure you mention all of these because they're all relevant to all forms of strength training. So first then, we're going to look at weight training, good old-fashioned weights, fixed weights, free weights, things like that. Now, as you can see, we can structure a weight training program in order to develop maximal strength, explosive strength or power, or what we call strength or muscular endurance, the ability to repeat a contraction over a set period of time. Now, first things first, do I think the examiner, I'm not an examiner, so I can't speak for them. Do I think that they need you to memorize all this stuff? I think it's too much. I think you'll need to know this, but I think these, you're just going to have to know the general patterns, and I'll explain that in a second. What we're going to do is if we want to develop maximum strength or explosive or endurance, first thing we've got to do is find your 1 rep max. So let's take a typical exercise. Let's take the bench press. So you're going to do the bench press and find your 1 rep max, the weight you can lift once and once only, right? If you then calculate 85 to 95% of that 1 rep max, but for the sake of easy numbers, let's say your 1 rep max in the bench press is 100 kilos. So 85 to 95% of 100 kilos is 85 to 95 kilos. Simple as that. That's the weight you want to be lifting if you want to develop maximum strength, maximum forces. Now, you need to know these 1 to 5 reps, 2 to 6 sets, and a work relief ratio of 1 to 3 plus. I don't think so. I think there's easy ways to do it. You know yourself, common sense. The heavier the weight, that is a heavy weight, the fewer the reps you're going to manage. So a heavier weight is for maximum strength. Therefore, you're going to lift it fewer times, fewer reps. But you might end up repeating that set anytime between 2 and 6 times. Repeating those reps, between 2 and 6 times. The work relief ratio, the other pattern is the heavier the weight is, the more rest you are going to need in between sets. Because basically, the more trauma you're leaving the muscles with by lifting the heavier weights. If you want to develop explosive strength, power, again, 1 rep max bench press, let's say it's 100 kilos, you want to be using a weight of 75 to 85% of that, i.e. 75 to 85 kilograms. Obviously, because it's lighter, you're going to get more reps out, 6 to 10 reps typically, around about 4 to 6 sets. And the work relief ratio is still quite heavy weight, so yeah, maybe 1 to 3. Remember, what do we mean by this? We mentioned it in previous ones. It means, for example, if it takes you 30 seconds to lift that set, to complete that set, you need at least 3 times that in terms of your recovery. And in terms of maximum strength, you need more than 3 times that. That's going to depend on fitness and, the weight that you're lifting. Is it 95 or 85%? If it's 95% of 1 rep max, you're going to need more rest. If it's 85% of 1 rep max, you're going to need less rest. But, it's there or thereabouts. Same with explosive, it's going to be 1 to 3. However long it takes you to complete a set, you need 3 times that in terms of your recovery. If it's strength endurance, this is a weight that is only 50% of your 1 rep max. So in the bench press example that we've given, 50 kilos would be the weight that you're lifting. Because it's half the weight of your 1 rep max, we can get a lot more reps out on it. So the lighter the weight, the more the reps, the heavier the weight, the fewer the reps. But again, we're repeating similar number of sets. And because it's an endurance element and you're not causing as much trauma to the muscles because it's not as heavy a weight, your work relief ratio is shorter. So you're only getting twice the rest of what it took you to lift. But don't forget, do 15 to 20 reps. It's going to take you longer than what it's going to take to do 1 to 5 reps. So, it probably will end up balancing out around about the same. But it's just making sure that, if you are lifting more reps, that set is going to take you longer. Therefore, your recovery, your work relief ratio is going to appear smaller, 1 to 2, but that actual work relief, that relief ratio time, is still going to be quite long. The good thing about using weights in order to develop maximum explosive or endurance-based strength is that if we use free weights, we can recreate any movement we want. Any movement we want, because the weights can move in any direction. So we can recreate any sporting action we want using these weights. And they're very, very good for your fixators. You remember the muscle groups that lock your body in position. If I'm standing, doing like a bicep curl, for example, my core, my abs are having to lock tight to fixate my body position, lock my posture. The downside to free weights are we do need a spotter because there is high levels of danger using free weights, more risk of injury because if you drop the weights on you or near you, there's a risk of injury. Whereas fixed weights in comparison, obviously they're safer and they provide you with more support. If you drop the weight, the worst thing that happens is there's a loud clang as the weight stack lands on itself, but it's not going to land on you. But the reality is they are less spot specific. You can only move these weights in one direction. You can only shift them in the direction the machine's designed to move in. So there's pros and cons to each one. So now plyometrics. Now this is very much a form of training that develops explosive strength or power. You wouldn't do this kind of training for maximum strength or strength endurance. You've probably done elements of this before without realizing it. It's this kind of stuff. Or, you don't even have to have these boxes. You can just be doing bunny hops and things like that. Plyometrics is hopping, jumping, bounding exercises. So basically, explosive movements, jumping off the ground and getting off the ground as quickly as you can. A lot of sprinters, jumpers, throwers will do this. Rugby players do this. Football players do this. Anyone who wants to improve power, plyometrics will be a big or a substantial part of their training program. Now, a little bit of technical language coming in. Just stay with it. Hopefully my description will make it become clear. We've got inside us something called a stretch reflex, right? Now, a stretch reflex is when a muscle gets long very quickly, or you force it to lengthen very quickly, it will automatically, i.e. reflex reaction, create a concentric contraction. Now, an element of this is just, not do it now, but at some point, just, take all the weight off your knees, just drop your bum to the ground. And without realizing it, your body will automatically produce a contraction to stop you from hitting the ground. You have to think about it. And we call that stretch reflex. So when we get a muscle to lengthen very quickly, we naturally produce a concentric contraction very quickly to stop any injury encounters, to stop any overstretch. So what we're seeing here is, look, this guy is jumping over. As he lands, his quadriceps, as he flexes his knees to land, his quadriceps are going to lengthen very quickly, and that's going to shock his stretch reflex into producing a powerful concentric contraction to take off over the jump. Which it's essentially what he's doing here. He jumps over there to land in that position. So every time you feel like you're dropping, your body will automatically. I bet you've had that one where you've woke up in the middle of the night, your arm's in the air, and it's dropped towards you, and you've automatically created a contraction to stop it hitting you, something like that. Or you might not have. Maybe it's just me. I'm a bit weird. But every time you lengthen a muscle very quickly, you automatically produce a concentric contraction to stop any injury, to stop any overstretch. So what we've got is, when this person lands from this jump, when they're in that position there, they're doing an eccentric contraction and landing. So the muscle is getting longer. Remember, an eccentric contraction, the muscle lengthens during that type of contraction. You immediately follow that. So his quads are doing an eccentric contraction there. Then his quads do a concentric contraction to extend the knee and push off over the box. And he's using this stretch reflex in order to do that very, very quickly. It works on the base of like a rubber band. The more you stretch a rubber band, when you let it go, it will twang, it will contract, whatever you want to call it, with a lot more force. That is what you're doing to those quads. They are lengthening on landing, so that's like stretching the rubber band, and then you let the rubber band go on takeoff, and it produces more force. So rubber band hypothesis, muscles contract with more force when they are pre-stretched. And that is the base of plyometrics, hence why it's hopping, jumping, bounding. We've got to land and stretch the muscle groups first. I stretch the rubber band so that they can then produce more force on takeoff. But the reality is the landing is an eccentric contraction and the takeoff is a concentric contraction. So it involves all these kind of exercises, mainly lower body exercises, bunny hops, single leg hops, split leg leaps, but also we can do upper body plyometrics exercises like push-ups, medicine ball throw sit-ups. Anytime where you are having essentially a landing phase, then a quick takeoff phase, you are doing plyometrics training, and that is developing explosive strength and power. And finally then, we've got circuit training, also known as interval training. Now, I know a lot of people do interval training. I thought that is like for like sprinting, or you can do interval long distance running. Of course it is, but remember, interval training describes any training where you do a work period and you follow that by a rest period. And we certainly do that in circuit training. We have stations where we have work periods, then we have rest periods where we have intervals in between. What we generally do in terms of circuit training is do alternate muscle groups. So you might have like an upper body exercise followed by a lower body exercise, followed by something for the core, then back to the upper body. So it gives give the muscle groups time to, get rid of fatigue in between each station. It typically develops strength endurance. If you think of circuits that you've done, the work periods have probably been about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, maybe even a minute. So if you're working for that amount of time, it's a strength endurance based circuit. However, we can shorten these work periods up, bring weights in, bring some form of resistance in, and we can change them to develop power or maximal strength using the things we've done before. Why can't you combine plyometrics and circuit training? So you've got like 12 exercises that are all plyometrics based. That would be a circuit that would develop explosive power. Of course you could do that. So these aren't separate entities necessarily. Those fixed weights and free weights we described are maximal strength training and strength endurance and explosive power, where we use the percentage of 1 rep max. Why can't we do circuit? So we can do all that as well. Big advantage of circuit training is large numbers can complete the circuit. We can get 15 stations, work with a partner, one of you works, one of you rests. We can get 30 if you're doing a circuit at any one moment in time. So, it is a case of, making sure if any questions come up on what we can do to develop any kind of strength training, remember what we said at the start. Talk about reps, talk about sets, talk about work and rest periods, right? Then you can talk about, right, in terms of weights, I can use a percentage of 1 rep max. And I can, use it to develop maximum strength, explosive strength, strength endurance, and how that weight then affects the reps that you're going to do and the rest that you're going to get. Then also talk about plyometrics training specifically for explosive strength, and what that means, going back to that slide. And then also what we can do in terms of circuit training, how we structure a circuit training program. Potentially, maybe 3 or 4 mark on its own, could be part of a 10-mark question in terms of how would an athlete go, or how would a coach go about structuring a strength-based training program. Hope you found this video useful, folks.